So I have Dan Handford with me today. Dan, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Todd.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about kind of managing investors. The goal, everybody wants to get the deal. They want to get the investors. And once that's all put together, then how do you keep everybody happy? How do you make sure the investors are, will want to invest with you again in the future? So maybe it just as like a quick overview, like once you get a deal, what do you do to keep your investors happy?
Yeah, well, there's quite a few things that go on there, and one of the things that I'll kind of mention to your audience first is our kind of philosophy about how we try to attract our investors. And one of the things that we do is we kind of look at this. I call it my investor triad, really, and it's not really something that I came up with. It's something that I've seen in other spaces, and some of you on here probably have heard of it before. But it's an investor triad. That's kind of it's a triangle. So if you're listening and you wanted to pull out a piece of paper, you could do that. Just write a triangle on your piece of paper or in your head. Just think of a triangle, and at the top of it, you could write the word know, K-N-O-W. The bottom left, write the word like, and on the bottom right, write the word trust. Know, like, and trust. And when you think about that, you think about, okay, in order for someone to be able to invest with me, I have to get them to be able to know, like, and trust me, right? Well, of those three things, which one is the most important? And that's really what you have to think about when you're trying to attract investors, but also comes full circle when you're trying to maintain your investors at the same time. And I'm going to get to that maintaining section or side of it in just a minute. But let me ask you, Todd, of those three things, what off the top of your head comes to mind? Know, like, or trust?
Well, I would say knowing has to come first because they can't like or trust you if they don't know you.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you've probably heard me say it before or not, but a lot of people think it's trust, right? They think, oh, the trust is the most important, or some people will say like, but really it's just what you said, Todd. It's no, right? Somebody has to be able to know you and get to know you before they ever have an opportunity to be able to make an opinion as to whether they like or trust you. And so you have to make sure you're filling your funnel, if you will, with new investors that are saying, hey, I now know you. I want to get to know you more. And so that's important from the top of the funnel, if you will. And as you start to go down the funnel and somebody actually invests with you, that means they've gone through that whole stage of liking you to the point of trusting you enough to actually send you and wire you money and say, I trust you to be able to manage my investment and I'm going to put it in one of your projects, right? Well, sometimes we think about it, we just stop right there. But you have to be able to maintain that relationship, because guess what happens when you actually maintain the relationship through the entire process? You now, that if you were to write arrows from know to like, and then from like to trust, it doesn't stop there. Matter of fact, it continues on in a cycle. You actually can now write an arrow from trust all the way back up to know. And you think, well, how can that person get to know you again? That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them to like you enough and trust you enough and enjoy investing with you enough that they start to refer their family and friends and colleagues, because now they're going to get to know you, and that whole cycle will start all over again. And it just creates an exponential effect when you're trying to grow your investor base. And so setting some of these things that we're going to talk about on the podcast today about how to maintain your investors is going to be crucially important as you continue to grow your investor base. And this is where I see a lot of operators, a lot of syndicators and sponsors falling short, is they stop once they get the investor in a deal. And that's actually for us in our group where it starts, or it really starts, or really begins, because we want to make sure that we can outperform for our investors. We want to make sure that we can over communicate. We want to make sure that they feel like more of a person, and we have more of a relationship with them than just a specific number. And so one of the things that we do with our projects, once an investor gets into the project, is we're going to over communicate. Every single month, by the 14th of every month, we send out an email update that gives them an update on how the prior month's performance was. So we have investors that have invested in every single one of our projects up to this point, and they're getting multiple emails, because every asset that they're in, they're going to get a separate email telling them about the occupancy, the pre-leased occupancy, the marketing, any type of marketing updates for the property, anything we're doing from a renovation standpoint or CapEx. We're going to provide pictures, community events, and then we're going to also include some local market news as we come across that type of news to help to confirm to the investors of what's going on in that particular market. And that's done by the 14th of every month. At the end of every quarter, that next month, we actually release our financials for the investors, and we put them on our portal so that the investors can go on there and download the financials so they can see and have transparency on how the actual property is performing itself. And one of the other things that we do is at the end of every year, a lot of times the K1s are what hold up investors from filing their taxes. I myself am in over 30 passive investments right now. And there's been several of them that I've had to wait and file an extension on my taxes personally, because I'm waiting on them to submit their K1s. Well, for our group, we try to get them done as soon as possible. So normally we have to have them done by like the 30th or the 15th or something like that. So we'll actually have them by March 15th, but we will usually try to have them done by the beginning of March, right? Where again, personal taxes isn't filed until April 15th, as everybody knows. But again, we've had to wait for some to come through because they didn't even get it done by April 15th. And so we try to get all of our books finalized and closed out by the end of December, and then finishing it up in the beginning of January so we can submit those over to the CPA to have those finalized. Like this year, I think we sent it out on March 3rd was when we sent them out to our investors. And so that's another kind of key point to be able to remember, that you got to put yourself in your investor's shoes. If you do anything to kind of tick off, if you will, your investors, they might not want to invest with you again. Yeah. And one of the other things that we do is the types of properties that we try to acquire are properties that cash flow day one. We're not buying lower end B and C class properties that are going to take a while to do renovations and they have really low occupancy. And we're trying to go in and outperform the property from a occupancy standpoint and renovating. That's not what we're trying to do. Now, we still do some renovations on some of our properties, but we're buying properties that are above 90% occupancy. Matter of fact, the lowest occupancy we have acquired is 93%. And that's because we need that cash flow day one so we can make sure we're giving to investors distributions the day we close, right? Maybe not the day we close, right? But we typically wait till we have a full month of operations under our belt. So we're actually closing a property later this week. And of course, at the end of every year on the 12th month, we always look back at the cash flows and see, are there additional cash flows over above the projections that we can distribute to the investors? And if we can, we will. But a lot of that, all those things that I've been talking about as far as maintaining is crucially important. And then there's some other things that we do too. And we can dive into that, but I'll stop real quick here, Todd, and see if do you have any questions about what I've covered so far?
Yeah, no, look, that's good. So you send out monthly emails and then quarterly updates and then the end of year stuff. Do you ever send anything in between, like if something comes up, or is it mainly?
Most of the stuff that comes up is going to be sent out in the monthly updates. Yeah. But I will say that one of the things that we opted to do is, instead of just updating our investors on a monthly basis, we decided to start sending a weekly email. We started to put together a weekly email. And so every week we send out an update on the collection status for the property, so the investors were aware of it, because we knew we were going to get questions about it. So instead of just waiting for questions to come in about, hey, where are the collections, and then worrying about if we're going to make distributions, we told them, we said, we're going to update you right now on a weekly basis on every single one of our assets. And it was a lot of work for us to do that every single week, but we felt like it was the best thing for our investors so that they knew what was going on during that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. A more proactive approach, and rather than them worrying about it and contacting you, you're upfront about them with them. So, okay, great.